India, the fifth largest economy in the world and the soon to be most populous nation on earth, is the case here. Hugely contributing to India's economic power on the global stage, its highly skilled labor force. India continues to have a relatively young and highly productive labor force, whereas several other nations are suffering with aging populations and workers who lack the proper skills. The economy has able to benefit from global events that, while they may appear to us as challenges, are actually providing India with excellent chances because of the manpower available there. The nation has garnered media attention over the past 5 years for snatching up several manufacturing jobs that had previously almost automatically gone to China. It would appear that India is taking over as the world workshop now that China's period of rapid economic expansion appears to be drawing to an end, and it can benefit from the wealth that comes with that position. This would undoubtedly be in line with the Indian government's ambition to achieve a $5 trillion GDP by 2025. But there is still a long way to go. Despite its achievements over the past 3 decades, China still falls far short of being a wealthy nation. Yet success in both of these countries stands to benefit people greatly on a global scale. At the moment, India produces 1 by 6 the production per capita of China. Even if China's economic progress has caused geopolitical issues, it has also helped hundreds of millions of people escape poverty, which is always a good thing, a positive item that is also replicable in India. Can India compete with China and the US as the next economic superpower? What advantages may it make use of to expand its economy to that point? What are the difficulties it will undoubtedly encounter that might prevent it from progressing? The quickest developing major economy in the world, India can then be added to Economics Explain National Leaderboard once we have completed all of the aforementioned tasks. Early in the 1990s, India's current economic trajectory began, roughly coinciding with China's. India economic prior to this was a haphazard amalgam of free market system left over from British colonialism and a certainly planned economy in the pattern of the Soviet Union. But due to collapse of the Soviet Union, which was their main trading ally at that time as well, generally weak economic growth under their system, the nation found itself in such a precarious situation with regard to its foreign debt that it only narrowly avoided going bankrupt thanks to a last-minute loan from the International Monetary Fund. The IMF employs the so-called Washington Consensus when an economy needs to be practically revived. The Washington Consensus is merely a collection of economic reform measures that promote free trade and private enterprises. In India, instance, the most important thing to be eliminated were its protectionist policies for its domestic sector and its immensely convoluted system of license and regulation that all enterprises had to follow. Protectionist measures do not necessarily result in undesirable outcomes. Governments will implement these regulations in order to, you guessed it, safeguard their regional economic sector. There are many different types of protectionist policies, but trade limitations like import, tariffs, or quotas are the most prevalent. In order to protect its domestic auto sector, India might impose an import tax on all imported vehicles, which would raise the cost of imported vehicles relative to those produced locally. The imported vehicles would still be offered, but they would be considered a luxury. The advantage in this situation is that most consumers would choose to buy domestically produced goods even if they were slightly inferior to those made abroad simply because they were less expensive, due to the fact that domestic companies nearly always have a consumer market. They may continue to operate and provide jobs for their employees. Although protectionist policies seem ideal in theory, there are two significant issues with them. They increase consumer prices across the board, which is the first issue. It goes without saying that the cost of imported items will be fraudulently overinflated, and consumers will pay the price for it. However, this also gives domestic producers space to increase their prices while still maintaining their competitiveness. The extent of import taxes and levies may also result in higher costs for enterprises when purchasing the raw materials that make up finished goods. Today, it's practically impossible to manufacture everything you require in-house, whether you are a developed or even a developing economy. Using a car as an example, you should think about the raw materials, components, parts, computer chips, as well as the equipment that creates the part that creates the car. Although it is theoretically possible for some economies to achieve complete independence, doing so would be extremely expensive. As a result, importing goods is almost always necessary for economies. A producer will also need to pass on this cost to the consumer if import taxes must be paid on all the components that they eventually incorporate into their finished product. Now, this may be desirable for some sectors, particularly those that have the potential to employ a sizable workforce or assist the economy in ways that go beyond just monetary benefits. In essence, you are exchanging increased pricing for increased employment and self-sufficiency, but doing so will reduce the product's cost competitiveness, which will cause price inflation in local markets. With Russian sanctions in the China trade war, we are currently seeing directly the effects of trade restrictions, obviously extreme cases, but the same process nonetheless. Today's economies are able to tolerate price increases with reason. Somalia would rank as the top superpower in the world if we only evaluated an economy's success based on how inexpensive everything is. The second significant issue that protections measures in the form of trade barriers can create is how this artificially increased price affects an economy's ability to compete internationally. A car manufacturer that produces subpar goods that it can only sell domestically since all of its rivals are subject to high taxes is unlikely to have much success selling its vehicle abroad due to this unfavorable playing field. This means that the economy is giving up the possibility to develop its own export market, which has the potential to generate more employment over the long run that protectionist policies could ever hope to rescue. In place of penalizing imports, the government might now subsidize local producers through grants, tax incentives, direct payments, or guaranteed purchase in order to support local companies that don't contribute to these issues. The clearest illustration of this is undoubtedly the USA, which supports farmers with subsidies in order to preserve that local industry for the employment it provides as well as the tactical advantage of being able to nourish its own people on its own. Although subsidy protectionist policies don't directly increase price for consumer, they force the government to pay more money instead of receiving it from import taxes, which means that eventually the taxpayer will be forced to pay the price regardless of whether it comes from higher taxes or higher prices. Protectionist measures, regardless of how they are carried out, constitute a direct intervention in the free market, and whenever that happens, inefficiencies result. For this reason, economies often begin to expand when they embrace free trade. To be honest, the inefficiencies brought on by protectionist trade policies in India were minimal in the comparison to the economic stress brought on by the excessive level of government involvement in virtually every aspect of industry. As previously stated, the command-style planned economy of the Soviet Union served as a major source of inspiration for India in the years after independence. The economy was managed in accordance with a number of 5-year plans that would concentrate on particular sectors like agriculture and heavy industry. However, it wasn't an exact replica because private enterprises was still allowed to exist. It was simply severely regulated. The majority of significant industries were dominated by massive heavily subsidized state-owned businesses, making it hard for private enterprises to compete in those marketplaces. Even in smaller areas like a corner store, it was nearly impossible to open a business. The license Raj, a system of stringent licensing rules and bureaucracy that enterprises had to abide by in order to function in India, was to blame for this. Just to be clear, this wasn't referred to as the license Raj in official documents. That was merely a word used to describe the draconian degree of governmental control over commercial activities, which was reminiscent of the British Raj, another repressive form of governance. Everyone refers to it as a rather tasteless joke. There are numerous other countries that have laws governing business, including licensing, and these laws frequently serve extremely significant purposes. In India, these restrictions extended beyond simply assuring business competency and safety. You don't want just anyone opening a doctor's office and doing procedures. They became so integrated into every facet of business operations that they were completely unnecessary. Before a corporation could even begin to produce anything, it had to appease as many as 80 different government entities, and it had to keep them satisfied for as long as it wishes to remain in operation. Any small businesses that wished to launch was severely constrained by the fact that it was nearly impossible for the average individual to navigate the system of licenses and rules without the assistance of a team of lawyers, which made it expensive for most people to even attempt it. Ignoring the licensing Raj entire and operating a firm as an unauthorized, unregulated corporation was really the one workable option to avoid it. It was less expensive and simpler to simply pay someone to enforce the law if they showed up than it was to set everything upright in the first place. This was great for tiny enterprises that could operate anonymously, but it meant that big international corporations would never even contemplate using India as a base of operation since it was just too difficult to do business there. Since they help India realize its potential, I have spent a lot of time discussing systems that were essentially eliminated more than 3 decades ago. A stagnant economy cannot be revived by simply removing economic constraint. We can study the experiences of nations like Russia, which implemented free market economic system but nonetheless saw its GDP decline dramatically after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. However, India has been on a very high growth track since 1991 and more so after 2000 when its population effectively doubled without these governmental constraints in place. India has historically been a very good environment to do business for a number of very significant reasons. With 125 million English speakers, it ranks second among all English speaking countries. Because English is used so frequently in international business agreement because it is seen as neutral. This is a huge concern for many businesses. This was primarily employed in the 1990s and 2000, so established call centers that were less expensive. I am sure you have all contacted a business previously, only to be put in touch with an Indian person. Although it may not seem like a glamorous career, it contributed significantly to the development of the nations. At its foundation, economics is the study of how people deal with valuable objects. On a larger scale, this raises concerns about how certain systems influence the value of the national or even global economy. Harvesting raw things like resources which nations do by excavating stuff out of the ground allows a nation to create value. This produces a lot of riches, but it is inherently unsuitable because those resources will eventually exhaust themselves. Because resources extraction also involves very little labor, there is significant chance that the ruling class and some fossil fuel businesses will take advantages of the resources, high margins and potential for profit. You will immediately see that having access to natural resources does not ensure economic prosperity. If you look at the list of nations with the highest oil reserve in the world, importing those raw resources and transforming them into components or finished goods is another way that nations can create value. Simply put, this is production. Manufacturing is beneficial to the economy since it uses more labor than most natural resources exploitations thus per unit of output of value. By distributing more jobs among more people, this leads to the development of a middle class, which make overt exploitation more difficult. Due to its lack of reliance on the sale of supply of finite resources, manufacturing is also significantly more sustainable than resource extraction. A nation might generate income from this industry virtually indefinitely if there is a stable flow of material imports and consistent global demand for the items they make. Unfortunately, the actual world obviously does not always operate in this manner, and economies based on manufacturing are subject to global economic conditions, both in terms of the import and export of raw materials. Pure production without the inclusion of more sophisticated services like R&D, designs, and marketing is also a never-ending race to the bottom. Product firms like Apple or Samsung can outsource their manufacture very much anywhere, and most frequently, they will choose the nation with the lowest labor cost and the least onerous manufacturing regulations. It is almost as unsuitable to build an economy around an industry that can only survive if workers are paid very little and businesses can get away with doing whatever they want. Of course, outsourcing manufacturing can be a profitable sector that serves as a type of stepping stone to a largely service-based economy. So this is for all for today guys. We will continue further in part 2 of this video. Take care of yourself. Give us your thoughts on this in the comment section, and if you appreciate our content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with your family and friends. We will meet soon in a new video. Thank you. Jai Hind.